On the evening of March 19, 2004, 17-year-old Brianna Maitland clocked out of her shift at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont. It was just after 11:20 p.m., and the night was calm. She told coworkers she was tired and ready to head home. But where she actually went next is a question that still haunts investigators, her family, and anyone who's tried to follow the breadcrumbs of her disappearance. Brianna never made it back. Just a few hours later, her 1985 Oldsmobile was found abandoned a mile away, backed into the side of an old, decaying barn. The tail end was literally pressed through the wall, lifting the rear wheels out of the ground. The scene was so bizarre that it's still cited today as one of the most unsettling crime scene images in modern unsolved history. And that would be the last verified trace of Brianna Maitland. Brianna wasn't the typical small-town teenager. She was independent, sometimes by choice and sometimes by necessity. She'd moved out of her parents' home shortly before her disappearance, determined to finish high school through a GED program while working 2 jobs to support herself. She was staying with her friend Jillian Stout in Sheldon, Vermont, trying to carve out her own life. By all accounts, she was smart, funny, and artistic. She practiced jujitsu. She drew. She dreamed of a future beyond the small towns of northern Vermont. But there were also shadows, whispers of hard partying, brief connections with risky crowds, and a recent altercation that had left her shaken. Despite the instability, Brianna had plans. She was still in touch with her parents, still setting goals, and the day she disappeared, she'd spent the afternoon shopping with her mom, Kelly. They'd had lunch, tried on clothes, laughed like everything was normal. Brianna had even left a note at her friend's house before going to work that night, saying she'd be home later. But after she clocked out of the Black Lantern Inn, she vanished. The next morning, a passing motorist spotted Brianna's car awkwardly wedged into the side of an old abandoned building, the Dutchburn Barn on Route 118. It was parked. It looked like it had been forced backward, its trunk embedded in the wooden wall. The rear wheels weren't touching the ground. Inside the car, everything seemed strangely undisturbed. 2 uncashed paychecks, her wallet, her migraine medication, her ATM card, even her contact lenses. A partly smoked cigarette still rested in the ashtray. It looked like whoever left the car had every intention of coming back, but Brianna wasn't there. Despite the eerie setup, police initially treated the vehicle as just another abandoned car. They had no immediate indication a crime had occurred, and no way to know its driver was missing. The car was towed, no crime scene tape, and no forensics work. It wasn't until days later, when her family reported her missing and linked the car to her, that authorities began to treat the case with urgency. But by then, any potential evidence around the scene had been washed away by weather, time, and neglect. After she left work around 11:20 p.m., no one definitively saw Brianna again. But several motorists would later tell the police they saw a car matching hers parked at the Dutchburn Barn somewhere between 11:30 and midnight. Some saw the headlights on. Others said the turn signal was blinking. A few claimed they saw figures standing near the vehicle, maybe 1, maybe 2, but none of the accounts were consistent. One witness swore they saw a pale figure behind the wheel. Another said there was a man standing by the driver's side door, but no one stopped. It was rural Vermont. After all, dark roads, low visibility, and a community used to minding its own business. In those crucial first 24 hours, no missing person report was filed. No red flags were raised. Brianna's roommate even assumed she was staying elsewhere. Police assumed the car was ditched. That delay, what would have been a critical moment for evidence collection, turned into a dead zone. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, no tire tracks leading away, but the silence itself was deafening. The emptiness of the scene was disturbing in its own right. It was as if Brianna had been lifted out of her life completely, surgically, and only the shell of her car was left behind. The barn loomed like a metaphor, abandoned, hollow, cold, just like the trail she left behind. In the weeks before her disappearance, Brianna had been in a physical fight with an old friend named Keali, probably pronounced Kaylee, Lacrosse. The altercation happened outside a house party in early March, barely 2 weeks before she vanished. Brianna was punched in the face hard enough to fracture her nose. She pressed charges, but the case never made it to court. In a small community like Montgomery, tensions like that don't just evaporate. People choose sides, gossip spreads fast, and rumors take on a life of their own. There was speculation that Brianna's disappearance might have been connected to retaliation, either directly or through association. Some thought Kaylee's friends, or someone connected to them, might have tried to send a message. Others insisted it had nothing to do with the fight, that Brianna had started hanging out with a riskier crowd, including people involved in drugs, and maybe she saw or heard something she shouldn't have. But the truth is, no one in her social circle ever came forward with information that helped. Some refused to talk. Others lawyered up quickly. That's a sign. Lawyering up that fast. There was a sense, even years later, that someone knew something and chose to stay silent. The party culture in small towns can be tight-lipped, especially when drugs or criminal activity are involved, and that wall of silence remains one of the most impenetrable parts of Brianna's case. And honestly, that's so true, dude. Like when you're in that crowd and there's like some weird illegal stuff happening, a lot of stuff stays, In 2007, 3 years after Brianna disappeared, an anonymous affidavit landed on a private investigator's desk. It claimed that Brianna had been killed the night she vanished. The letter named 2 men, Raymond Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, both known to police, both connected to the local drug scene. According to the affidavit, Brianna had been at a party with them, taken drugs, and overdosed. Rather than seeking help, the men allegedly panicked and disposed of her body at a pig farm, possibly in a slurry pit or under manure. The letter gave just enough detail to sound plausible, but not enough to lead to a body or criminal charges. And as we know from the Belle Gunnis episode, pig farms are pretty good about getting rid of bodies. Investigators tried to track down the men. Ryans had already fled the state. Jackson was questioned, but nothing stuck. There were no confessions, no evidence, and no arrests. And yet, this theory has never been fully ruled out. Then, in 2016, a new piece of evidence emerged. Law enforcement revealed that they had discovered DNA on items inside Brianna's car. Forensic testing was conducted, but the results were never publicly released. Whether the DNA belonged to a known associate or a complete stranger is still unknown. The secrecy has only fueled further speculation. In 2022, another tip surfaced, this time from a man who claimed Brianna's body had been dumped in a well behind a house not far from the barn. Authorities searched the property. The well was emptied, but again, nothing was found. Over time, the affidavit, the DNA, the well. They've all become puzzle pieces without a frame. Each one whispers a version of the truth, but none can prove it. Through it all, Brianna's family has never stopped searching. Her father, Bruce, has been at the center of those efforts, turning grief into drive. When official channels began to run dry, Bruce found another way. In 2017, he founded Private Investigations for the Missing, a non-profit organization that provides free investigative support to families of the missing. It's staffed by licensed professionals, many of them former law enforcement officers, and aims to give families what he once didn't have: help, advocacy, and momentum when the case goes cold. Bruce has long believed that Brianna was met with foul play, and not by some random stranger. He suspects it was someone she knew, someone local, someone who manipulated her trust or lured her into a false sense of safety. In interviews over the years, he's expressed frustration with how slowly authorities moved in those early days. The delay in treating her disappearance as suspicious may have permanently altered the trajectory of the case. Despite the slow start, law enforcement has since re-engaged with force. The Vermont State Police maintain that the case is still active and under investigation. And where did the Vermont State Police come from? That's right, the disappearance of Paula Weldon, which you can go back and watch the Bennington Triangle series now and learn about that. They've collaborated with the FBI, forensic labs, and private contractors. Leads continue to come in, even 2 decades later, and every single one is reportedly logged and reviewed. Officials had described it as one of the most haunting cases in the state's history. One of, again, the Bennington Triangle. Go check it out. In 2024, on the 20th anniversary of Brianna's disappearance, Vermont authorities renewed their public appeal, offering a $40,000 reward for information that leads to her recovery or the prosecution of anyone responsible. Hey, so I'm going to interrupt the episode right now. As I said, 2024, they reopened the $40,000 reward. So on screen is the phone number for you to be able to call and submit a tip, as well as the website. So go ahead, pause that, screenshot it. If you know anything, let them know. And that would be absolutely fantastic if this could get out and maybe somebody sees it and Brianna gets found or somebody gets arrested. Back to the episode, and thank you for watching. In the words of law enforcement, quote, "This is not a cold case. This is a missing person investigation with active leads and national interest." And they're right. Interest in the case has never fully died. True crime communities online have kept it alive, dissecting every clue, analyzing photographs of the car, and comparing the scene to other unsolved disappearances. Journalists revisit the case every few years, and new podcasts bring Brianna's story to fresh ears with every re-release. A generation that barely remembers 2004 is now rediscovering her disappearance and asking the same painful question. How can someone vanish so completely and leave so much behind? Bruce still holds out hope that someone, somewhere, will break their silence. He's not naive. He knows time erodes memory, complicates relationships, and buries the truth. But he also knows that guilt doesn't just disappear, it festers. And maybe someday it will be too heavy for someone to carry anymore. Until then, he and so many others continue to wait, hoping that one small piece of truth will be enough to crack the silence wide open. There are some stories that fade because they end. Others fade because they never do. Brianna Maitland's case falls into the second category. There was no dramatic discovery, no body recovered, no shocking confession, just a 17-year-old girl driving home from work, vanished into the void of rural Vermont, and a car left behind like a forgotten clue in a riddle that refuses to be solved. And that car, it still haunts people. The way it was backed into the barn, half swallowed by splintered wood, tells a story of urgency or chaos, or maybe deliberate design. It doesn't look like an accident. It looks like a message. But to who? For 2 decades, the questions have outlived the leads. The barn has collapsed. People have aged. Stories have shifted. And still, somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to Brianna. Maybe they've convinced themselves it wasn't their fault. Maybe they were a witness, not a participant. Maybe they've buried the truth for so long, it barely feels real anymore. But she's still missing, and her family still waits. We don't tell these stories to reopen wounds. We tell them because silence should never be the final chapter. We tell them so names like Brianna's don't fade into cold case files and distant memories. Because someone out there knows, and someone always has. And at the end of the day, it's a podcast, it's a YouTube channel, it's, just a TikTok. Sometimes it gets it out there and it gets in front of the right people and somebody figures something out. There's definitely a bunch of internet sleuths like on Reddit and everything like that have solved crimes. And this just so happens to be one of those ones that, if you ask me, being backed into the barn and the tires aren't touching the ground in the rear, I'm assuming she was trying to get away, but couldn't because the rear tires were pulled up. So that's just my 2 cents of that. If you liked today's episode, go ahead and give me a subscribe, hit that notification bell. This has been Cracked Relic, and as always, sources will be in the description and coming up after this. Thank you for watching.